Welcome back to the Badger 247 show. Once again, I'm Matt Perkins, joined by Badger 247 writer Nick Osen, our favorite road warrior anywhere around. Nick, it is great to see you, buddy.
Perko, thank you so much. You know, as we were talking about a little bit just leading into this show, you know, I've been on the road a lot, 17 of 18, and we got a lot of, fun content to get into. But, man, just to illustrate how I was feeling yesterday, Perko, my partner, my fiance now, Vivi, was practicing something for work, and she was reading it to me, and she's recording. And I promise you, her content wasn't that level boring. But about 2-3 minutes in, I fell asleep on the couch, and I just didn't believe it. And then she hops up right away. Like I said, she's recording, and you can just hear this loud snoring. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And then we go to get, like little ice cream treat, whatever. This is Thursday night. And then I come back, and for the third time in the afternoon, in the day, fell asleep on the couch. So all that to say, it's been amazing. A lot of coverage, a lot of content to talk about, but nice to be here in the home office talking with you, my friend.
Absolutely. John had to run out today, but he'll be back again with us next week, of course. So we're going to do a little two-man game here instead of our three-man weave like we usually do. But that's okay because Nick, like we said, has been out on the road in Vegas. And so we got to get all the inside details from Big Ten Media Day. I'm going to start with a broad question for you, Nick. What's your biggest takeaway, or what did you learn, I should say, at Big Ten Media Days about this season's Badger team?
Yeah. No, Perko, honestly, I learned a lot. I will just start from the outset that Coach Fickell gave this local media, it was like four of us, 30 plus minutes and just kind of a little roundtable discussion. And I don't think every program does that. So I was very fortunate to get that type of time. Some of my biggest takeaways or things I learned, we knew a little bit of where things were trending with Nazir Forkurine, but that is not over. Wisconsin, the Badgers and the university have filed an appeal. So that is still an ongoing process. Obviously, the goal is to get a conversation with Nazir going and to be able to have him play here this fall for Wisconsin. So that was a big one. We had alluded to kind of the potential of it before on the boards, or I guess kind of our lack thereof, going into deep explanations, kind of pointed it out. But Drayden Pavey, not with the team. He was going to be a freshman here. Did not end up enrolling. So we learned that officially from Fickell and UW Communications due to personal reasons they shared. So that was kind of that announcement. I think the running back room, which I know you and you're smiling. We both love that classic O-line running back type of work with the Badgers. Fickell is not someone I would say that just throws out like superlatives or just says things to say things. And I don't want to mess up the quote, but I know it was something to the extent of almost probably, if not for sure, the most competitive group on the team. And he didn't make it a comparison to others, but he said, hey, you want to see how this offense is going to be, what can determine our season? That room is going to be a huge determining factor for it. So those were kind of my top 3 or 4 takeaways, Perko. I've got a ton more that we can get into, but I did just a short takeaway story that day, and those were all kind of part of that.
Yeah, I think that running back room obviously is going to be having a lot of eyeballs on it for a variety of reasons. You've got a lot of young, exciting talent, Dylan Jones, Darian Dupree, but also some veterans who you can rely on in Cade Yakimelli. And we'll see how they end up using Jackson Aker. From my conversations with people in and around the program, you should not be surprised if Jackson Aker is getting not to say a lot of touches. He's not going to get the lion's share of the touches, but he is going to get significant carries, especially in the second half, as this team tries to wear other teams down, like we have seen Badger teams in the past try to do. But that's not going to be effective if they don't have an offensive line to block for them, Nick. And obviously, with the injury to Kevin Haywood, there's still a lot of question of who's going to end up at left tackle. Did you get any clarity on that, at least where they're leaning heading into fall camp?
I wouldn't use the term clarity just because I would say we've kind of been right up on it in terms of our explanations, but some validation, right? Some confirmation. Davis Heinzen, the transfer, obviously the Wisconsin native, is in that mix. Joe Brunner's a name that might be. Fickell did mention him, as well as Emerson Mandel. So while I I do think it's hard to kind of label a 1A right now just because, yeah, Brunner's probably the best lineman out of that group right now, but do you want to move him from guard? Because he's an elite interior offensive lineman. Do I think he'd be good at tackle? Yes, but we will see what that looks like. Mandel's still super young. I'm very high on Emerson, but we'll see what that looks like. Heinzen is maybe like the high floor out there, but he maybe doesn't have as much of kind of the size or the ceiling potentially. So it'll be really, intriguing to see size. I just mean like maybe quite the size of some of the Wisconsin offensive tackles. He's still certainly plenty big and can play. And I was really impressed interviewing the young man when he committed here. So I think there are some solid options. Obviously, you'd love to have Haywood and just run with that top 5, but that's not the case right now. That's certainly a top 3 position we will be watching come Platteville.
So the 3 Badger representatives out in Las Vegas were Ricardo Hallman, Jake Renfro, and new quarterback Billy Edwards Jr. And so how do you feel like, at least from what he talked to the media this week, how do you feel like he has sort of taken a hold of a leadership position on this team? And how is he either similar or different from the transfer quarterbacks the Badger fans have seen the last 2 years in Tanner Mordecai, Tyler Van Dyke, and to a lesser extent, Braden Locke, because he was never the starter going into the season?
Yeah, Perko. So, the Big Ten did an amazing job, as always, but they did an interesting thing that I haven't been used to, where they had the players overlapping with Coach Fickell. So I will note I didn't get quite as much time as I would have liked around QB1 Billy Edwards Jr., because I felt it'd be very important to still get everything you can from Fickell and some of the other guys. But in terms of just kind of taking in the offense and being such a leader and a vocal leader and a connector, I really like that term. I've used it. I've heard coaches use it. I think that's where Billy stands out a little bit. I think he's a heck of a football player. I think Mordecai was a really, really good football player. I think Van Dyke, you didn't get to see his potential. So I do think there's still some similarities. But just in terms of, a big thing that I've really asked about and heard about, including even with some of the O-linemen before, is just the way that Billy connected with Jeff Grimes so quickly. I think the offensive fit is perfect for both sides. And that is where I think maybe coming in, outside of that original 2023, where there was all the hype, new hire, and the new offense and things, I think this is probably the most comfortable you feel at quarterback going in. I'm not saying he's going to be, a Heisman winner, but I think when Billy's at his best, he's really, really good, Perko. There are obviously other factors, but I do feel pretty comfortable at QB right now.
That actually reminds me, Nick, of a really interesting thread that's been going on our discussion boards here at Badger 247, which if you are not signed up and are not a member and subscribing, you need to right now, because you're going to get these really interesting debates amongst not just the fans, but also amongst the writers, yourself, John, Payne. It was Billy Edwards Jr. versus Bo Pribula, who, had said that he was interested in coming to Wisconsin, the Penn State transfer, who ended up hitting the portal before Penn State went into the college football playoff because of just the way the timing worked out. He was someone who was vocal about wanting to come to Wisconsin, didn't end up coming because Wisconsin got Billy Edwards Jr. And for me, I think that I understand the upside of Pribula, right? Really big time recruit, did a lot, showed of at least something when he came in to play against Wisconsin at UW last year, a game I was at, which was my one game I got to go to last year in person. But I was interested because for me, if I am in the program, if I'm someone around the program, and I have 2 options, right? A guy who I have seen be a full year starter in the Big Ten and have at least some success versus a guy who we've seen just a couple times and have flashes of, with a program in the state that Wisconsin is in right now, which is a little bit tenuous considering they've had back-to-back losing seasons. Back-to-back losing seasons, right? Am I losing my mind? Or were they 7-6? Either way.
7 in year 1, but yeah.
Yeah, well, either way, back-to-back underperforming seasons. Let's go there. I'm personally going to want to go a little bit safer with a guy I know who can compete at a Big Ten level, even if he doesn't necessarily have the highest upside.
Yeah, that was an interesting kind of back and forth that's been on the boards just because of that Pribula interview that was out a couple weeks ago. I tend to agree with you, Perko. I think that Pribula is going to be good. I think both guys seem like really, really impressive people. but you need a guy that has done it consistently multiple times on the biggest stage. And I think that you watch Billy Edwards Jr.'s film from last year on a tough team that wasn't at its best. He was pretty darn good. And
And a
again,
team
I
that
think
had a really difficult schedule like
really
Wisconsin
good.
does this year.
And I think that is also something that attracted Billy here too, because I don't think he's been shy about that either, wanting to be amongst the best, competing against the best. So while I think both quarterbacks should probably have good years, and I think pretty good on both people's ceilings, I totally understand the move for Wisconsin. I'm a fan of it. I've said that from early on. And just, again, you talk with him. He really, leadership qualities, moxie. Like, I really think I've been, as you said, tenuous about some of my projections just because I said a couple positive things last fall and then people came back at me after camp. But I think that he's going to be really good. One of the better Badger quarterbacks we've probably seen in a while. And he should be a nice fit for this offense to lead to 6-7 wins, at least in my eyes.
We've spent this entire time talking about the offense, so we need to talk about the defense at least a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we mentioned the up in the air status of Nazir Forkareen, but his tandem partner in the cornerback room, Ricardo Hallman, was there. Rico's a guy who could have gone to the NFL draft this year, elected to come back for a senior season. How do you feel like he has stepped up as a leader in not just the defensive back room, but, as the defense as a whole? And, what is he expecting from himself in his final season in Madison?
Well, Perko, you are awesome at this, man. Not surprising because I hadn't even told you. So I got a one-on-one with Rico that I will be releasing as well. And I tweeted this, but I just, I've interviewed hundreds of people. You don't often just get impressed with every single person, but just the way that he's been so loyal to the program. He has gone the kind of old school traditional route of slow start developing, like not just his freshman star right away. Now he's one of the best, what would you say, 6-7 corners in the country, 8, like one of the best for sure. Maybe that's a little over, but like he was an All-American 2 years ago, and they didn't really throw his way last year. So certainly one of the best, a team leader, and something he told me that he really wanted to add to Perko is his verbal leadership. He's led by example. He's not like a shy person by any means, but just having that big voice. He said that's something he's really embraced. And I'll let you in on this because I know that people have been a little bit, maybe worried or some questions about the defense. He's excited about that defensive line front. And I think he likes how much the staff really kind of invested and focused on them. That, of course, can allow for more plays made on the back end.
Yeah, for sure. He is someone who I don't think is that natural vocal leader. Bernie and I had him on earlier this spring, and it takes, a minute, I think, to get him out of his shell a little bit. He's not a big rah-rah guy. Like you said, he has been a leader by example. But I feel like at this point in his career, he kind of needs to be by just by, him being sort of the true veteran presence on that defense. Yes, they have, some very veteran safeties in Preston Zachman and in Austin Brown. Yeah. And, Austin Brown's a talker. Like if you've met Austin's a really good talker. I really enjoyed getting to interview him earlier this spring as well. But I think that when you see the guy that is the All-American who is, you see him sort of stepping out of his comfort zone to do something a little bit more, I think that is very influential on the rest of that defense. So I think what I want to move now to is not from necessarily this year's team, but to sort of the overall big picture of how they are building this team. And you had a really interesting sit down with Marcus Sedberry, who is sort of the, I don't know, is he the GM? Like what is his
general manager?
Right, he's the GM. What was your biggest takeaway with that and sort of what his approach to building not just a team, but an entire program is?
Yeah, I'm so grateful to Marcus Sedberry's time, quite honestly, because that was one that I just thought, we're here. I'd love to make this happen. And he was very open to it. And we sat down for probably 15, 16 minutes. I did it in kind of a Q&A format so that I can include so much. But really, really impressive person, Perko, great leader. Has had an amazing kind of breadth of experience within football and competition. And two of the biggest things that stood out to me, I would say one, he is so competitive, just like Coach Fickell, just like McIntosh. Like, you talk about fans wanting to win and getting restless if X doesn't happen or Y doesn't. Like, you could feel the levels of competition from him, Perko. And then number two, I think in terms of team building and building a program, it's what I've said before on this show. I've written about it. I've talked about it on radio and things. Retention, retention, retention. Like, they still want to be a traditional program, which I really like because I like so much of high school recruiting. So they still have the base in that. They want to retain their best guys. And yes, you're going to need to use the portal. You'd be silly not to fill in holes. But that is kind of my understanding and what I learned from him, Perko. I think that, he gave a nice look into what he actually does, how it kind of combines a lot of different things, personnel, financial aspects, of course, that is part of being a GM as well. So, really, really good stuff. I'm grateful. And yeah, that was out today for our Badger 247 members. And if you just love watching these shows, but you haven't joined the site, we are offering a 50% off promo right now. Now, if you can't make it happen this week, but you can in a couple weeks, that's totally still okay, because this will go on for a few weeks with fall camp. Really, really impressed and excited with some of our content going forward.
Yeah, it is exciting to sort of get into the details of program building in 2025, because it is so different than when you and I started covering college football, when we started watching college football, even as kids, right? Because all of us were at least molded in the sort of Barry Alvarez way of doing things, right? And you're building culture from just literally like the bottom up. And now with bringing guys in from the transfer portal, I think it is so hard to determine if that culture fit is right, because you have such a compressed window of time to get to know these guys. And I think that is sort of the biggest sort of mystery still going forward, right? Because it's not just you have all these talented guys, because we know that it's not always necessarily the most talented team that wins. Yes, talent, obviously huge, still the most important thing, but there's also some alchemy there. Like, if you have a bunch of talented guys that don't like each other, like I'm trying to think of, I think it's from Breaks the Game. I want to say the David Halberstam book, or maybe it's a different basketball book, or no, that's what it was a baseball team book. I forget which one it was. They say after the game, 25 guys got on 25 different planes and went 25 different places, right? Wow. And when even if you have the most talented team, that's like, not necessarily the best thing to be, not necessarily putting out there in the world, but that probably says something about how you guys are going to play with each other. And so I think trying to figure out how the personalities work with each other and the head coach in the transfer portal and NIL age is just an endlessly fascinating topic.
No, Perko, I mean, man, you said it so well, and I'm glad, because I actually forgot to mention one of my biggest things that I hit on with everybody, right? Fickell, Hallman, Renfro, Marcus Sedberry, a little bit about with Billy beforehand, not as much this week, but the culture, man. And I believe, like, I'm not, going on and picking like an 11-1 fall, but I've written that I believe the culture is in the best spot right now for the program we've seen in several years. And that goes along with that retention. The guys know your culture, their talent, they build together. So I think that's really, really important. I love how you broke that down. And that is one thing I've been really impressed and consistent about with Fickell and this recruiting department and these guys, even though, there have been ups and downs, that they recognize how important that culture piece is and hopefully continues to be in Madison.
Yeah. So no matter how this all plays out, though, you got to be on Badger 247 to get the latest information. That's where Nick will be. That's where I will be. That's where John is. That's where Payne is. And that's where the best message boards around are. So make sure you are over at badger247.com and subscribing to everything that we are doing over there. We appreciate everyone tuning in here to the show. We'll be back again next week with more information, more stories, and more insights. So in the meantime, make sure you're over on the website checking out everything. We appreciate you tuning in. Make sure you like, subscribe, rate, review, all that good stuff. And until next time, we'll see you on the message boards.